የኢትዮጵያ አምራች ኢንዱስትሪዎች ከከባድ የብረታ ብረት ፋብሪካዎች እስከ ተራቀቁ የቴክኖሎጂ ምርቶች
Ethiopia's manufacturing sector is undergoing wide-ranging transformation from heavy steel industries to advanced technology production, from industrial parks to special economic zones, and from dry ports to international maritime gateways. We now present the next segment of the Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation's special interview with Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed on Ethiopia's manufacturing sector.
የኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮች ጉዳይን ስንመለከት ያኔ ኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮቹ
When we look at industrial parks, especially those developed prior to 2018, there was great optimism that they would transform the country and fundamentally reshape Ethiopia's manufacturing landscape. The expectation was very high, but what prevented them from performing as intended? What benefits have they delivered? Where did they fall short? And in light of the current economic environment, both domestically and globally, how far can these industrial parks take us?
እነዚህ የኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮች ምን ያህል ያራምዱናል?
የኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮች ፋይዳ አላቸው ወይ? ምን ጥያቄ የለውም። ፋይዳ አላቸው። ለዚህ ነው ባለም
There is no question that industrial parks have value. They are important. That's why there are more than 1,000 such parks globally. Introducing them in Ethiopia was the right and necessary decision. While their implementation needs to be reassessed, their importance is unquestionable.
አንደኛ ኢንቨስትመንት ለመሳብ
First, industrial parks are more effective at attracting investments than scattered standalone factories. They can draw in greater levels of investment. Second, they reduced infrastructure costs. Instead of building separate roads, power, and water systems for individual factories across different locations, concentrating them in one area significantly lowers infrastructure expenses. Third, they can create synergy. Firms can supply inputs to one another, improving efficiency and simplifying management, since operations can be overseen within a unified system. These are substantial advantages. However, as I mentioned earlier, had their earlier approach followed development corridors such as rail-based corridors as envisioned during the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, the parks would not have been so dispersed. More importantly, they should have been located along routes that are strategically aligned with import and export logistics. The main shortcomings of the earlier approach were first, location choices. Dispersing parks across cities like Jimma, Mekelle, Bahar Dar, and Hawassa has its logic. But industrial parks are most effective when positioned along corridors conducive to import and export. For agro-processing, proximity to farmers makes sense, but for export-oriented industries, dispersal across region is not efficient. Second, the cost, as I noted, around $1.6 billion was spent. It was extremely expensive. By contrast, the industrial park we are now developing at Bolilemi Phase 3 is comparable in size to some of those earlier parks, yet it is being built at roughly half the cost, with equal or better quality. This raises legitimate questions. If similar projects can now be delivered at half the cost, what explains the earlier expenditures? Third, there was an excessive focus on construction, almost like a real estate approach. Sheds were built everywhere, but many remain unoccupied due to lack of investors. Even today, occupancy is only around 80%. Instead of ensuring that one park is fully utilized before expanding to the next, construction continued without sufficient demand. This approach mirrored real estate development rather than industrial strategy. This challenge stemmed from limited domestic capacity, high costs, insufficient market analysis, weak feasibility studies, and heavy political decision-making pressures. The process was also highly vulnerable to inefficiency and waste.
ከዚያ የተከተልነው አካሄደኛ ምንድነው? አንደኛ ከኤክስፓንሽን ወደ ኦፕቲማይዜሽን እንቀይረው ነው። ከብዛት ወደ ጥራት
Our approach, therefore, has shifted. First, we moved from expansion to optimization, from quantity to quality. It is no longer about simply increasing the number of parks, but about improving their performance. Second, we emphasized integration and coordination. Out of the 26 industrial parks currently in Ethiopia, 7 are privately owned. The government's role should be to facilitate while allowing private industrial parks to expand. That has been our strategic direction. If you take examples like the parks developed by private investors such as those in Akaki, they are frankly more advanced in some respects than publicly developed ones. These are not limited to textiles. They are moving into heavy industry, metal processing, automotive spare parts, and beyond. Similarly, the Chinese-developed Eastern Industrial Zone is diversified, integrated, and aligned with the true model of industrial parks. Importantly, these were developed without Ethiopia incurring debt. In terms of output, they are at least as effective, if not more so, than publicly financed parks. We have also changed how we build. Parks like Ararti and Bolilemi Phase 3 have been constructed by domestic companies, significantly reducing costs. This has told us that, had we applied similar approaches earlier, we could have saved substantial resources. In terms of operational performance, most parks only became functional after the reform period. They had been built earlier but were not operational. The results we see today are largely post-reform achievements. Investor numbers tell the same story. Previously, there were around 36 investors in industrial parks. Today, there are more than 300. Shed occupancy has also improved from about 45% before the reform to 88% today. Productivity has also increased from around 40% to approximately 50%. There is still room for improvement, but the progress is clear. If we look at employment, focusing on industrial parks alone, excluding other factories due to their broad scope, there were previously around 27,000 jobs created within these parks. Today, that figure has risen to over 90,000 within just the past 5 to 6 years.
ኤክስፖርትን ብትወስድ በለውጡ ጊዜ 51 ሚሊዮን ዶላር ነበር ከኢንዱስትሪያል ፓርኮች የሚገኘው። በሚቀጥለው ዓመት ግን ካለም ጥርጥር ከኢንዱስትሪያል ፓርኮች ብቻ 1 ቢሊዮን ዶላር እናገኛለን።
Exports show a similar trajectory. At the time of the reform, industrial parks generated about $50 to $51 million in export earnings. In the coming year, however, we are confident that industrial parks alone will generate $1 billion in exports. This reflects a clear transformation, not only in exports, but also in employment, job creation, and local economic linkage. In fact, around 60% of industrial parks are now integrated with domestic industries, which was not the case before. At that time, local participation was almost non-existent. Today, the role of local industry has expanded significantly. Taken together, these improvements and our continued efforts to ensure consistency and sustainability demonstrate that the result we have achieved in industrial parks and in manufacturing more broadly have improved substantially across all key indicators in scale, in employment, and in export performance.
በኢምፕሎይመንትም በኤክስፖርትም በከፍተኛ ደረጃ ተሻሽሏል ብሎ መውሰድ ይቻላል።
የኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮችን ወደ ልዩ የኢኮኖሚ ዞኖች የማሸጋገር ስራዎችም እየተሰሩ ነው።
Work is underway to transition industrial parks into special economic zones. What does this shift entail?
እርሱን ጉዳይ ቢያብራሩልን። ምንድን ነው ሽግግሩ?
ኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮች ቅድም ላነሳልን እንደሞከርኩት አምራች ናቸው።
As I mentioned earlier, industrial parks are primarily focused on manufacturing. However, when they evolve into free trade zones, they go beyond production and begin to facilitate trade as well. If you take the example of Dubai, its free trade zones are designed to receive goods from across the world and re-export them globally. Our objective is somewhat different. We aim to ensure that imported goods reach the domestic market efficiently through an improved logistics system. Since we do not have direct access to a seaport, this approach helps us reduce the high cost of imports and improve the flow of goods within the country. In essence, it enhances both trade and logistics. For example, if we consider the Jeddah Free Trade Zone, it has been operational for only 6 to 7 months, yet it has already facilitated transactions exceeding $27 million. This is purely in trade. Previously, such value would not have remained within our economy. Now, by integrating it with our dry port system and utilizing it effectively, we can retain and expand the wealth domestically. Beyond exports, these zones also play a critical role in import substitution by supporting domestic production. They are key mechanisms for reducing logistics costs and strengthening economic efficiency. As industrial parks evolve into free trade zones, they add trade and logistics capabilities to their manufacturing base, enabling them to generate greater and more diversified economic value.
ውጤት ተጨማሪ ንግድን ሎጂስቲክስን በመጨመር የተሳለጠ እና ያደገ ሀብት ሊያመጡ ስለሚችሉ ወደዛ እያደጉ ያሉት
እንደዚህ የኢንዱስትሪ ፓርኮችን ጉዳይ ጠቅላላ አድርገን
Looking ahead, what is the overall strategy for industrial parks? Where are they headed?
የት ነው በአጠቃላይ የሚያመሩት?
ቅድም በአዝማሚያ እንዳነሳውልህ በነዛ አዝማሚያዎች ውስጥ እኛ አድቫንቴጅ የምናገኝባቸው
As I noted earlier, Ethiopia has a clear areas of comparative advantage, as well as areas where we face challenge. Our strategy is to maximize our advantages while minimizing our weaknesses, with the ultimate goal of transforming Ethiopia into a manufacturing hub. Logistics is central to this ambition. For instance, the airport we are developing will be the largest in Africa, is designed to serve as a continental air transport hub. This is not a small investment, it is a strategic one, built on our existing advantages. Beyond Ethiopian Airlines, the airport itself will attract a wide range of economic activities. Second, clean energy is a major advantage. Through projects like the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Koyusha Dam, our solar initiatives, and even emerging nuclear efforts, we're investing heavily in clean energy. This gives us a strong competitive edge in manufacturing. Third, demographics. Ethiopia is a young country and we are investing in human capital from early childhood educational onward. As these young people are trained and equipped with skills, they become a powerful asset. Many are already technologically savvy, and through initiatives like 5 million cadres, we are expanding digital and AI literacy. This created a strong foundation for a modern manufacturing economy. Finally, policy plays a crucial role. By enabling the private sector, creating new financing mechanisms such as bonds and reducing the burden of debt on government, we are fostering an environment where private investment can thrive. These measures are helping to energize the private sector and position it as a key driver of Ethiopia's industrial future.
ከትኩረት አንጻር ያየህ እንደሆነ ፎከሳችን ስትራቴጂ ምርቶች ላይ ነው ጀስት ዝም ብሎ ጨቃጨቅ ሳይሆን ለምሳሌ ሶላር
From a strategic standpoint, our focus is on only priority sectors. We're not pursuing a scattered approach. For instance, in solar energy, we are deliberately bringing in a select number of strong companies. You may attract hundreds in low-value sectors like textiles, but a handful of well-chosen investment in strategic areas can generate far greater value. Accordingly, we are targeting key sectors such as electronics, including electric vehicles, alongside aerospace, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, and agro-processing. These are carefully selected areas where we see the greatest potential for impact. That said, challenges remain. There is no denying that. Let me give you a striking example. Ethiopia is working hard to achieve self-sufficiency, not only in food but also in pharmaceuticals. In line with this policy, a committed Ethiopian investor established a pharmaceutical factory in the Qilinto Industrial Park. These facilities capable of producing around 60 types of medicines and more than 2 billion tablets annually. It represents a significant leap forward, far beyond our current capacity. We need these medicines. The demand is there. The factory has been built by our own citizens. Yet despite this, Ethiopian banks, particularly state-owned banks, have not provided the necessary working capital. As a result, the factory remained idle for over a year. This raises a critical question. If banks are not extending working capital to a fully established pharmaceutical plant, who are they lending to? In many cases, financing is being directed toward vehicle purchases. Under the banner of tourism, state banks are extending up to 100% loans for high-end vehicles, luxury cars with large engines.
ሪሶርስ በተገባው መንገድ አሎኬት ያላደረጉ ችግር መልኩን ይቀይር እንጂ አሁንም ያለ በሽታ ነው።
This reflects a misallocation of resources. While a pharmaceutical factory that could serve millions stands idle due to lack of working capital, financing is readily available for non-essential consumption. This is a systemic issue that must be corrected. If even a fraction of those resources were redirected, if the funds used to purchase TEM vehicles were instead provided as working capital, the benefits would be immense. The medicines produced would serve our own people. Think of how many lives could be improved or saved. This is why focusing on strategic products and ensuring proper support mechanisms is essential. When domestic investors are encouraged and enabled, the results are not only economic, they are transformative. Previously, when we built industrial parks, we did not establish incubation centers or post-incubation systems. Now we recognize that much like early childhood education, without incubation, major industries cannot secure the inputs they need. Today, large incubation centers are being developed. For example, near the Ministry of Labor and Skills, a major incubation center is nearing completion. It will provide hands-on training and practical experience for students. Beyond that, in Addis Ababa, a large post-incubation industrial park developed at a cost of around 7 to 8 billion birr in Clinton area has been established. Its purpose is to allow emerging entrepreneurs to start production, supply the local market, and they grow, transition into larger industrial parks. This creates a structured pathway from training to incubation to full-scale industrial production. Rather than entering industrial parks prematurely, enterprises can build skills and capacity step by step. When this ecosystem is integrated with the special economic zones, it delivers comprehensive results. By learning from past mistakes, improving financial systems, ensuring access to created land and energy, and by maintaining continuous follow-up and problem-solving, we are building a far more effective and globally competitive industrial framework.
በከፍተኛ ደረጃ ውጤታማ የሚያደርገን አካሄድ እየተከተል ነው ማለት ይቻላል።
እንግዲህ አንዳንዶቹ ነጥቦች ላይ ተጨማሪ ጥያቄዎች አሉን፣ ግን አንድ ነጥብ ቀድመን ብናነሳ ደስ ይለኛል።
Well, I do have a few follow-up questions on some of the points you raised, but before we get into those, I would like to start with one key issue. There's a major theme we keep hearing about repeatedly, the Made in Ethiopia initiative. Over the past few years, it's been presented as a flagship national movement, particularly in the manufacturing industry. Now, efforts to stimulate and support manufacturing are not entirely new. There have been earlier initiatives aimed at energizing this sector. So what sets Made in Ethiopia apart from those previous efforts? From one angle, how is it different in terms of its underlying philosophy? And from another, in terms of implementation, what tangible results has it delivered so far?
ኢትዮጵያ ታምርት ከነዛ ቀድሞ ይደረጉ ከነበሩ ማነቃቂያዎች የተለየ የሚያደርገው ምንድነው? በአንድ በኩል በፍልስፍናው፣ በሁለተኛ መልኩ ደግሞ ባተገባበሩ እስካሁን ያፈራው ፍሬ ያመጣው ውጤት ምንድነው?
አንዳንድ መከራ አንዳንድ ችግር ያስተምር የለም። ኮሮናና የአገዋ መሰረዝ ኢትዮጵያ ብዙ ያስተማራት።
Recent challenges, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and Ethiopia's removal from AGOA, have taught us important lessons. Made in Ethiopia is distinct from simply producing in Ethiopia. Producing in Ethiopia means that any investor, regardless of origin, manufactures locally and we benefit from that activity. But made in Ethiopia goes further. It is about empowering Ethiopians themselves, building domestic capacity, resilience, and ownership. It is about ensuring that whether faced with global disruptions like pandemics or external trade shocks, our industries remain stable because they are rooted in local capacity. We've been implementing this approach over the past few years, and it is already delivering remarkable results. It is guided by a set of strategic pillars we refer to as the ABCD framework. The first pillar, A, stands for autonomy. This involves shifting industrial development from government-led to private sector-driven growth. By supporting and enabling the private sector, we are expanding its role significantly. Today, approximately 2.6 million Ethiopians hold business licenses across various sectors, including industry. This is a substantial increase compared to the past. It reflects our efforts to push the private sector into production and entrepreneurship. Small and medium-sized industries have also grown significantly. Previously, there were around 8,000 such enterprises. Today, that number has risen to over 26,000. Large-scale industries have similarly increased from around 3,000 to approximately 4,200. This growth spans key sectors, including cement production, fertilizer, steel, gas, and other heavy industries. It is also reflected in rising foreign direct investment, which has grown by about 22.7% this year alone. Energy consumption for industrial use has increased even more, indicating expanding production capacity. The second pillar, B, stands for backward linkage. This refers to the ability to produce inputs domestically rather than relying on imports. In the past, over 90% of industrial inputs were imported. Today, we are actively working to replace those imports with local production. Take the example of beer production. Previously, breweries imported malted barley, despite Ethiopia being a barley producing country. Today, 100% of the malt used in beer production is sourced domestically. Similarly, in textiles, uniforms for the military and police were once imported. Now they are fully produced locally, and we have even begun exporting uniforms. The same applies to wheat. In the past, Ethiopia spent around $1 billion annually on wheat imports. Today, that dependency has been significantly reduced. These examples illustrate what backward linkage means in practice. Building domestic capacity to supply industrial inputs, saving foreign currency, and strengthening economic resilience. In addition to this, our 4 integrated agro-industrial parks are now providing market linkage and structured input supply for nearly 1.2 million farmers. These farmers are no longer producing in isolation. They are integrated into value chains. Take maize as an example. In the past, we primarily consumed it in its basic forms, roasted, boiled, or milled in traditional ways. Today, however, maize is being transformed into 13 to 14 different products. It is processed into cereals, children's food, and various nutritious food items. This marks a significant shift through industrial processing. We are beginning to fully utilize maize across multiple value-added applications.
በኢንዱስትሪያል ፕሮሰሲንግ አቅማችን በቆሎን ለብዙ ነገር ማዋል እየጀመረ ነው። ለኤክስፖርትም እንዲመች አሁን በየሆቴል ለምሳሌ ሴሪያልስ የምታያቸው የቁርስ ለሚቀርቡት
This transformation also supports our export ambitions. Previously, products like breakfast cereals served in hotels were entirely imported. The questions we asked was simple. Why import what we can produce locally from our own maize? Today, production has begun within our industrial parks. Similarly, products such as edible oils are increasingly being sourced from local imports. This is what we refer to as strengthening backward linkage, reducing import dependency by building locally supply chain. The third pillar is capacity utilization. It's not enough to build capacity. We must ensure that we use it fully and efficiently. Previously, manufacturers in Ethiopia were either idle or operating below capacity due to energy shortage, lack of working capital, or operational inefficiencies. To address this, we established a manufacturing council under my office. Since its formation, more than 800 previously non-operational factories have resumed production. These were not new factories. They had already been built but were sitting idle. By identifying and resolving their constraints, we brought them back into operation. Previously, our manufacturing sector was operating at only 47% capacity. That means factories were producing less than half of what they were capable of. This is a significant loss. Today, without even accounting for new factories, capacity utilization has increased to approximately 67%. This is a major improvement, an increase of nearly 20 percentage points, bringing us close to doubling effective output in some cases. This progress is a result of targeted interventions to remove bottlenecks and optimizing existing capacity. At the same time, we are increasing the share of locally produced goods in our domestic market. Currently, about 44% of our consumption of industrial products is supplied by domestic production. This is a positive trajectory and it will continue to grow as we expand our industrial base and reduce imports. The fourth pillar is diversification. This means expanding the range of products we are producing locally, particularly those we previously imported. So far, we have substituted imports worth over $3.6 billion with domestic production. In total, we have identified around 96 products that can be produced locally. While we have not yet replaced all of them, we are progressing step by step. For example, edible oil production is being localized. The ceramic industry has a strong potential, and we expect to meet 100% of domestic demand in the near future. Glass production is also within reach. In the steel sector, Ethiopia already has substantial capacity. If we secure sufficient raw materials, either through scrap or iron ore, we can fully meet domestic demand and even export. We have recently begun working with international partners, including Chinese companies, to develop our iron ore resources. Once this is operational, it will resolve a critical bottleneck in the steel industry. The impact will be far-reaching, transforming infrastructure, housing, and manufacturing sectors across the economy. In pharmaceuticals, we have reached about 44% local production, and we expect to exceed 50% within this year. There are still market challenges, including resistance from established import-dependent systems, but we are addressing these issues progressively. Import substitution is not theoretical, it is practical and measurable. By systematically replacing these 96 identified products, we can significantly reduce foreign currency outflows and strengthen our domestic economy. Another important development is the growing participation of domestic investors. Today, about 65% of the investors operating in industrial parks are Ethiopian. Previously, these parks were dominated by foreign direct investment and export-oriented production. While exports remain important, we have adjusted our approach to also prioritize local production, especially for import substitution. It is not practical to leave industrial parks underutilized simply because production is not export-oriented. We are also advancing in technology-driven manufacturing. For instance, Ethiopia now has the capacity to produce solar energy equipment capable of generating up to 13.5 gigawatts. This is a significant technological leap. In the mining sector, we are moving beyond raw exports. Historically, we exported gold in its raw form. Now, for the first time, we are finalizing the construction of a gold refinery, which will soon be inaugurated. This will enable us to add value domestically and utilize both our own gold resources and those from the region. Fertilizer production is another strategic priority. With the development of our natural gas resources, we are building the foundation for large-scale domestic fertilizer production. At the same time, we must address structural inefficiencies. As a landlocked country, our logistics costs are high. For example, if we had invested earlier in pipeline infrastructure from Djibouti to Dredwa, just 200 to 300 kilometers, we could have transported fuel much more efficiently. Like water through a pipe, this would have significantly reduced costs, time, and logistical burdens. It is a lesson for the future.
ለውጥ ያወጣልና ኢትዮጵያ ታምርት እንቅስቃሴ በጥቅሉ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ያለን አቅም በደንብ መንዝረን ለመጠቀም ጋፖቻችን ለመለየት
Overall, our industrialization effort is focused on fully utilizing our national potential, identifying gaps, supporting industries, expanding domestic production, and building a strong base of Ethiopian industrialists. We are seeing encouraging results, and we are also learning that when Ethiopians produce, they can completely effective and deliver high-quality outcomes. Regarding macroeconomic reform, the changes we have implemented are foundational. The impact may not always be immediately visible, but it is deep and structural. Without reform, our economy was like trying to run with tied legs. You may move, but you cannot reach your destination. The reform agenda focuses on opening the market, creating a predictable and trustworthy business environment, and expanding the role of private sector. Previously, structural constraints limited progress. Today, we are seeing improved competition and efficiency. For example, after reforms in governance and management, Ethiopian Electric Utility reported a profit of 7 billion birr in just 6 months, something unprecedented in its history. This reflects a broader shift. State-owned enterprises are now being managed with business discipline rather than political direction. There is still work ahead, but the transformation underway is substantial, and the results, I would say, are truly encouraging. First and foremost, the financial sector reform has brought about significant transformation. At the level of the National Bank, we have introduced automation into financial transactions. Previously, one had to physically go to the bank to withdraw or transfer money. Today, platforms like Telever have made life considerably easier, something every citizen can attest to. Even within families, the ability to send money instantly has reduced friction and improved day-to-day interactions. When we look at the capital market, Ethiopia, despite its size and potential, had long been absent from a system that enables the mobilization and circulation of capital. As a result, capital was often locked in certain areas, while demand in others remained unmet. Now many people are beginning to follow the dynamics of capital markets globally. But for a long time, we were not part of that space. That is changing. We have also strengthened public financial management, both in terms of revenue generation and expenditure control. A common question we receive is, where does the funding come from? Given the scale and number of projects underway across the country, it is a valid concern. In fact, there are so many projects that even managing their completion and inauguration is a major undertaking. Financing, as I have said before, comes from a combination of loans, grants, and domestic revenue. But what truly matters is disciplined and strategic allocation. When resources are invested wisely and with commitment, they have the power to transform a nation. The progress we are witnessing in Ethiopia over the past few years is largely the result of our effort to channel resources productively within the country, rather than diverting them into less impactful areas. As a result, we are seeing tangible outcomes. Foreign exchange availability has improved, exports have increased, and import substitution efforts are bearing fruit. In just 9 months, we have achieved exports worth approximately $7.6 billion, despite external pressures such as regional instability. If the current pace continues, we are on track to reach around $10 billion in export this year. To put that into perspective, this is equivalent to what Ethiopia used to generate over 3 years, now achieved within a single year. This demonstrates what is possible when policy is backed by execution. Policy alone does not deliver results. It must be supported by experience, market understanding, responsiveness to demand, and consistent effort. Reform is not an overnight process. It requires learning, discipline, and time. But the trajectory we are now on is encouraging. We are also seeing a strong performance in foreign direct investment. Ethiopia is now among the leading destinations for FDI in Africa, with significant investments in sectors such as energy, aviation, infrastructure, fertilizers, and natural gas. Our foreign exchange reserves have grown substantially by several multiples compared to just a few years ago. Of course, challenges remain, but the distance we have covered is meaningful, and it shows that progress was always within reach had we moved earlier with a focus and determination. When reforms began, there were skepticism and criticism. Today, I believe many are beginning to see the results and draw lessons from them. If policies are implemented with knowledge, discipline, and careful study, they will yield results. There is no reason to assume that approaches that have worked elsewhere cannot succeed here. What matters is adapting them to our context and executing them effectively.
ኢንዱስትሪው ምናል ለእድገት ልብ ነው አልናል። ኢንዱስትሪው ለኢኮኖሚ ልብ ከሆነ መሰረተ ልማት ደግሞ ደም ስር ነው።
Let me also emphasize the critical role of infrastructure. We often say industry is the heart of the economy, but infrastructure is a bloodstream. Without a functioning network to support it, even the strongest industrial base cannot operate effectively. The two must work in harmony. That is why we are investing heavily in key infrastructure areas: industrial parks, free trade zones, energy systems, logistics roads, and railways. For example, the corridor connecting Ethiopia to Djibouti, our primary trade route, is being significantly upgraded through both highway and railway. This corridor is essential to the economic artery of the country. Rail infrastructure, while expensive, is essential. We are also building local capacity demonstrated by projects where Ethiopian engineers have successfully constructed railway segments. Similarly, road development continues at scale, with major expressways progressing rapidly. In aviation, beyond expanding regional airports, we are developing a major new hub airport to position Ethiopia as a continental gateway. Dry ports are another critical component. The Mojo Dry Port, which will soon be inaugurated, represents a major milestone. In terms of capacity, technology, and storage, it surpasses many existing facilities in the region. Connected to rail and designed with modern automation, it will significantly enhance our logistics efficiency and support future growth. Finally, digital infrastructure is equally vital. Without fiber optics, reliable internet, and data systems, a modern economy cannot function. That is why we are investing extensively in digital connectivity, ensuring that our industries, markets, and institutions are fully integrated into the global digital ecosystem. In summary, the reforms we have undertaken across finance, infrastructure, and investment are beginning to yield results. With continued discipline and commitment, we are confident that Ethiopia will sustain this momentum and achieve even greater progress in the years ahead. First and foremost, for the first time in our history, we are in the process of building a truly national and sovereign trade system. This is something we did not have before. All the infrastructure we are putting in place across industry, commerce, and information systems is designed to significantly enhance our capacity to anticipate developments, prepare in advance, and respond efficiently. It is about creating a system that is proactive rather than reactive.
ኃይል ከሌለ ኢንዱስትሪ የለም። የኢንዱስትሪ ምግቡ የኢንዱስትሪ መጠጡ ኃይል ነው። ኃይል ጠጥቶ ኃይል በልቶ ነው የሚያመርተው።
Among the critical infrastructure priorities, energy stands out, particularly in relation to manufacturing. Without energy, there is no industry. Energy is the lifeblood of industry. It is both its fuel and its sustenance. Industry consumes energy to produce. If we fail to supply sufficient energy, industrial growth simply cannot occur. Moreover, the energy we generate must increasingly come from renewable sources, because that is the global direction and the competitive standard. This year alone, energy demand from Ethiopian industries has grown by 23%. That means we have supplied 23% more energy to industry compared to last year. And naturally, this increased energy consumption translates into increased production. It reflects growth, not just in numbers, but in real economic activity. Our strategic direction in the energy sector is firmly anchored in clean and renewable sources. Take, for example, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Despite immense challenges, financial constraints, lack of external financing, and sustained diplomatic pressure, we've managed to bring this project to life. It has come to at a cost, yes, and we have faced criticism and resistance. But today, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam stands as a living reality, providing energy for our people and creating opportunities for export while powering our industries. Similarly, the Koisha Dam project is progressing. It would not have been prudent to launch multiple large-scale projects simultaneously without securing adequate financing. That is why we prioritize completing the GERD before shifting our focus. Now, with the GERD completed, we have turned our full attention to Koisha. Within the next 2.5 years, it is expected to become fully operational. At the same time, we are expanding into other renewable energy sources. Wind energy projects such as those in Aisha and Asala are coming online. Geothermal initiatives in areas like Tulu Moye are underway, albeit with some challenges. We're also exploring future options, including nuclear energy, as part of the diversified energy strategy. Ethiopia is uniquely positioned in this regard. With our vast potential in hydropower, solar, wind, and geothermal energy, we have the capacity to become a continental leader in clean energy. If we fully harness these resources, we will not only meet domestic demand but also compete globally in supplying energy to industries. This brings me to an important point about narrative. For many years, Ethiopia has been described as the water tower of Africa. While this is not entirely incorrect, it is also not sufficient. The narrative must evolve. Ethiopia should be recognized not merely as a source of water, but as a powerhouse of renewable energy. Why does this matter? Because simply having water does not automatically translate into development. If that water is not harnessed, if it does not generate energy, support agriculture and sustain livelihoods, then its value remains unrealized. For generations, our water resources have carved valleys and shaped landscapes, but they have not always translated into tangible economic benefits. True transformation comes when water becomes energy, when it supports food security, and when it sustains life. That is the direction we are now pursuing. By repositioning ourselves as a renewable energy hub, we can unlock the full value of our natural resources and reshape both our economy and our global standing.
እንግዲህ በጣም ትልልቅ ጉዳዮችን ያነሱልን አሁን ደግሞ የውሃን ጉዳይ ካነሱ አይቀር
You have raised some very significant issues, and since the topic of water has come up, it's only natural that we also turn to one of our country's biggest national agendas, the question of sea access. There has been a great deal of discussion around this issue, but specifically in relation to industry, how much pressure had the lack of direct sea access placed on Ethiopia's manufacturing sector? And if the current efforts to address these challenges succeed, what would that mean for the industry, particularly for the manufacturers?
ለኢንዱስትሪው በተለይ ለአምራቾች ያለው ትርጉም ምንድን ነው ይላሉ?
ለኢትዮጵያ የብልጽግና ጉዞ ኢትዮጵያ ዜጎቿን በበቂ መግባ ራሷን ችላ
For Ethiopia's journey towards prosperity, our ambition to become a nation that feeds itself, stands on its own, and competes globally. One of the most critical constraints we face is our lack of sea access. When we talk about the issue today, I believe the scale of the pressure it creates and the challenges it poses are now clear for everyone to see. For a country of Ethiopia's size and stature, remaining cut off from the sea is not just an inconvenience, it is a matter of national survival. That reality, I think, is now widely understood. Being landlocked is in many ways like being exposed without cover. We have a culture. In our culture, even in times of hardship or plenty, there are ways of preserving dignity and privacy. But without access to the sea, a nation is left without that kind of cover. Take the digital sector, for example. We have spoken at length about it before. Much of our infrastructure depends on external systems, submarine fiber optic cables that pass through other countries. On the other hand, we are still developing national cloud systems and encryption layers robust enough to ensure full confidentiality. On one hand, we are still developing national cloud systems and encryption layers robust enough to ensure full confidentiality. On the other, both our satellite and fiber connections pass through external routes. That means we lack what you might call digital sovereignty. We have no real cover for our data. In practical terms, that means limited control over confidentiality. Now, of course, not everything must remain secret forever, but there are matters of national importance that require confidentiality, at least for a period of time. Without that, we are exposed. The same applies to trade. Not every import or export detail should be visible to everyone. Just as in a household, where what you buy or sell is not necessarily public knowledge, a country also needs a degree of economic privacy. Without sea access, that layer of protection is weakened. Whether in imports, exports, or broader economic activity, then there is the issue of logistics, which we have already highlighted as critically important. The cost of burden is extremely high. Compared to countries with direct port access, including our neighbors, our logistics costs can be 50 to 100% higher. A product shipped from China and sold in Nairobi, for example, can be at least 30% cheaper than the same product sold in Ethiopia. That difference is largely due to logistics costs. And when you factor in transport, handling and delays, profit margins shrink. This is why you see such price disparities between markets like Kenya and Ethiopia. It's not just about price, it is about efficiency and speed. In today's global economy, delivering goods on time is crucial. If you fail to meet deadlines, contracts can be cancelled, even if the delays was not your fault but caused by logistical constraints. Over time, delays can also affect quality, especially for perishable goods.
በአጭር ጊዜና በረዥም ጊዜ ከፍለን ካልሰራን በቀር የባህር በር አልቦነት፣ የወደብ አልቦነት፣ የሎጂስቲክስ ውስንነት የኢትዮጵያ ብልጽግና ላይ ከፍተኛ ማነቆ ሆኖ የሚቀጥል ችግር ነው። በእኛም ዘመን ከኛም በኋላ ባለው ዘመን
So unless we address this, both in short term and long term, our lack of sea access combined with logistical limitations will remain a major obstacle to Ethiopia's prosperity, not just in this generation, but in those to come. What surprises me at times is hearing people treat this as a distant or abstract issue. The question of sea access is not just about governments or geopolitics. It affects the daily life of every Ethiopian. If a piece of clothing costs 50 birr in a country with an efficient transport, it might cost 70 birr here because of these constraints. The same applies to soft drinks, medicines, virtually everything. Every citizen feels the impact. Ethiopia is one of the most populous countries in the world, and historically, it did not face this kind of constraint. Securing access to the seas through trade, dialogue, and mutual benefit is entirely possible. Along the coastline stretching from Massawa to the tip of the Horn near Mogadishu, thousands of kilometers rich in resources, there is ample opportunity. But if we fail to engage constructively, to embrace cooperation and coexistence, and instead move in ways that harm one another, then continuing without sea access is neither sustainable nor beneficial for us or for the region. This is not just Ethiopia's issue, it is also a regional and even global concern. Why, for instance, does the opening of the strategic routes like the Strait of Hormuz become a global priority? Why would disruptions in the Red Sea matter to the entire world? If the Red Sea were to close, who would be more affected than us? Even within Africa, East Africa is particularly vulnerable. North African countries have ports in proximity to Europe. West African countries like Nigeria do not face the same constraints. Southern routes are different altogether. But for us, whether it is the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, or nearby strategic corridors, disruptions directly impact our economy, and we often lack the leverage to respond effectively. That is why this issue is so critical. It demands attention, not just from us, but from the wider international community. So what we are doing? In the short term, we are expanding trade corridors, particularly through Djibouti and around the Mojo area. We are investing in dry ports, free trade zones in Redwa and Mojo, and improving rail and highway connectivity. These measures help ease import flows and reduce costs, even if only partially. But in the long term, Ethiopia cannot achieve sustained growth without securing sea access. More than that, the region itself cannot achieve lasting peace and stability without addressing this issue. Global trade also depends on stable, well-managed corridors, and countries with the scale and capacity of Ethiopia must be part of that equation. Global trade also depends on stable, well-managed corridors, and countries with that scale and capacity of Ethiopia must be part of that equation. If major actors are excluded, smaller states alone cannot guarantee the security of these routes, which creates broader risks. So from a long-term perspective, Ethiopia's access to the sea is not optional. It is not something to debate endlessly. It must be pursued peacefully through dialogue and negotiation, but it also is essential. Anyone who believes Ethiopia can remain indefinitely cut off from the sea is quite simply mistaken. You cannot compromise on a matter of survival and still expect to achieve prosperity. The question may be how and when, but not whether. It will require careful planning, multiple approaches, and sustained effort, both in the short and the long term. Because without this, our industries cannot become globally competitive. If you can produce something for timber and I produce the same for 20, no one will buy from me. Across agriculture and industry, three major constraints hold us back: quality, timelines, and cost, much of which is driven by logistics. Unless we address this, we cannot compete, we cannot grow. That's why the issue of sea access is not just a policy matter. It is a fundamental national priority for every Ethiopian citizen, for regional peace, and for those who believe in shared growth and prosperity. It is an urgent and unavoidable concern.
ኢምፖርታንትና አንገብጋቢ ጉዳይ መሆኑን መገንዘብ በእጅጉ አስፈላጊ ይመስለኛል።
መልካም ክቡር ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር በጣም ሰፋፊ
Well, Your Excellency, you have raised a wide range of important issues in great depth. As we wrap up today's discussion, I would like to conclude by asking about your vision. What is your vision for Ethiopia's industrial future? And within that vision, what role should the younger generation and domestic investors play in advancing the country's manufacturing sector?
የሀገር ውስጥ ባለሀብት ሚናቸው ምንድነው መሆን ያለበት ይላሉ?
የኛ መንግስት ራዕይ ያለውን ስታይ በግልጽ በጽሁፍ አስቀምጧል። ለኢትዮጵያ ብልጽግናን
Ethiopia must become a center of industry and technology. Our citizens must be productive, working not only for their country, but also for themselves and their families, ensuring prosperity through their own labor and dedication. This vision has been expressed in writing, in speech, and is now increasingly being demonstrated in practice. To realize it, first and foremost, we must significantly strengthen the Made in Ethiopia movement. Ethiopia must produce, Ethiopians must create, innovate, and manufacture. We will continue expanding innovation centers, post-incubation parks, and industrial parks. We will further empower domestic investors and citizens and across the country. We will drive initiatives that boost production and productivity. At the same time, we will continue to strengthen the macroeconomic reform agenda we have already begun, moving forward in a consistent and result-oriented way. The third key pillar is automation. As you have seen, automation has already begun in areas like Mosob and in service delivery. More broadly, we've made meaningful progress, even though more remains to be done. We're now building systems that allow us to gather statistical data in real time through unified dashboards that support government decision-making. In the financial sector, automation services are expanding. In agriculture, we are increasingly applying modern technologies. Our goal is to ensure that citizens use technology to improve productivity, efficiency, and quality. That is central to our work. At the same time, we are working to improve access to finance step by step so that viable projects are not held back due to capital constraints. As I mentioned earlier, even projects like pharmaceutical manufacturing have faced delays due to financing gaps, but we are addressing this challenge. We're committed to providing better and more accessible capital so that industry can grow, expand, and thrive. In my view, the macroeconomic reform agenda supported by the National Steering Committee, along with improvements in energy supply, land access, and financing, will, within the next 2 to 3 years, produce visible results in the industrial sector. We have already seen this kind of transformation in other sectors. Take mining, for example. Not long ago, when we spoke about its potential, there was little attention. At the time, the sector generated around $30 to $40 million. Today, it has grown to nearly $4 billion. That growth will continue with the new gold processing facilities coming online soon.
አሁን ነምበር 1 ኤክስፖርታችን ማይኒንግ ነው። ያው በጣም ሩቅ ነበር ከግብርና። አሁን ነምበር 1 እሱ ነው። ይሄም እድገቱ እየቀጠለ ይሄዳል።
Mining is now responding strongly within our economy. It has become our number 1 export sector, surpassing even agriculture. In the same way, the work we have begun in manufacturing will yield visible results in the coming years. The sector's share of GDP, which historically has remained around 5 to 6%, will grow significantly. On the technology front, we are making major investments, AI universities, AI cities, and technology parks. Alongside this, we are expanding early childhood education and working to develop 5 million cadres as we build a technologically capable workforce skilled in areas like open cloud systems. We will strengthen the foundation for industry and economic growth. Ultimately, all of this will accelerate our journey towards prosperity. I firmly believe, not just as a government vision, but as a national reality, that Ethiopia will prosper. There is no doubt about it. We have already seen what is possible in recent years, launching major reforms, transforming cities, and reshaping agriculture. Ethiopia will prosper. A new generation has emerged, creative, ambitious, and full of potential. Our youth are bright, forward-thinking, and eager to achieve. With proper guidance, they are capable of building and creating. Ethiopia is a country with a rich history, a proud legacy of independence, and abundant natural resources, many of which are only now beginning to be fully realized and utilized. Across sectors, tourism, technology, industry, agriculture, and mining, we are witnessing Ethiopia's potential unfold at an unprecedented level. Over the next years, I have no doubt that Ethiopia will become a leading nation in Africa, but this will not happen through wishful thinking or passive hope. It requires hard work, day and night, commitment, and determination. If we work with full dedication, refusing dependency, rejecting complacency, and striving with discipline, we will build the Ethiopia we envision. I may or may not fully enjoy the fruits of that prosperity in my lifetime. My role may simply be to help lay the foundation, but I am certain I will see it, and that my children will live in it. That belief is what drives me every day, and if you and others share that same commitment, then together we can ensure that our reforms and efforts deliver real results. Some may not fully grasp the space or scale of the progress Ethiopia is making, but Ethiopia will not stop. Ethiopia will not retreat. Ethiopia will move forward, and our aspirations will be realized step by step. There is nothing that can hold us back if we work with integrity, determination, and unity. With God's guidance and through the hard work of our people, we will continue to move forward. For that, we are grateful to God, to our people, and to all those who are striving and contributing. At the same time, we must be clear, corruption and theft do not build a nation. A lack of effort does not build a nation. Only through hard work, discipline, unity, and focus can we succeed. And I believe we now have a clear vision and a strong foundation already in place to achieve Ethiopia's prosperity. It is my hope that both you and I and all Ethiopians will witness a nation that rises, that stands tall on the global stage, and that frees itself from poverty, dependency, and hardship. Thank you very much.
ከልመና ከእርዳታ የምትጠበትን ሀገር እኔም አንተም ማየት እንድንችል ማሳካት እንድንችል ምኞቴ ነው። እንግዲህ እጅግ አድርጌ አመሰግናለሁ።
እዚህ ላይ ምንም የሚጨምር
Thank you, Your Excellency. We truly appreciate your time.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure.